I can still feel the weight of that moment, the dust settling on my skin, the sun burning the back of my neck, and the sound of their laughter fading into the distance. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. "Kyle!" The word tore from my throat, raw and desperate. I was running, arms flailing like some kind of madman, chasing after the truck that was already halfway down the empty road. "Kyle, wait!" But they didn't wait. They sped up. Through the back window, I could see them, Brad and Chase, Kyle's older brothers, their phones pointed at me, recording every second of my humiliation. Chase's voice echoed back through the hot, still air. "Good luck, Lena. See you in 300 miles." And just like that, they were gone. The gas station sat like a forgotten relic in the middle of nowhere. One rusted pump, a cracked concrete lot, a vending machine that looked older than me, stocked with chips that had probably been there since the 90s. That was it. No town in sight, no other cars. Just me, standing there in the July heat, watching the man I married disappear around a bend in the road. My phone was dead, completely dead. I'd left it in the truck when I ran inside to grab Kyle an energy drink. He'd asked so sweetly, too. Told me he was too tired to go in himself, that he just needed a little boost for the drive. So I went. I always went. And when I came back out, they were gone. At first, I didn't believe it. I stood there staring at the empty space where the truck had been, half expecting them to come rolling back any second, laughing their heads off. "It's just a joke," I told myself. "Kyle does stupid stuff sometimes, but this is too far. He'll come back." 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. I sat down on the curb, my hands trembling, my mouth dry as sandpaper. The heat pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I kept glancing up at the road, expecting to see the familiar shape of our truck cresting the hill, but there was nothing. Just shimmering heat waves and the occasional bird circling overhead. An hour went by. I stood up, paced around the parking lot, tried to look calm, like I was just waiting for someone, like this was normal. But my heart was hammering in my chest, and my stomach felt like it had dropped through the pavement. Then my phone buzzed, one last gasp of battery life before it gave out completely. I grabbed it, nearly dropped it in my rush to unlock the screen. One message, from Kyle. "Don't be mad, babe. Just a prank. We'll come back in a bit." I stared at the words, read them twice, 3 times, waiting for them to make sense, waiting to feel relieved. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt hollow. This wasn't funny. This wasn't a prank. This was cruelty. This was the man I had married, the man I cooked for, cleaned for, defended to my friends and family when they said he wasn't good enough for me. And he thought leaving me stranded hundreds of miles from home was entertainment. The screen went black, my phone died, and something inside me died with it. I looked around. A trucker was filling up his rig at the pump, barely glancing my way. The clerk inside the convenience store was visible through the smudged window, scrolling on his phone. I walked inside, my legs shaky, and asked if there was a phone I could use. He shrugged. "We don't got a landline. You got family coming?" I don't know." He looked at me for a long moment, then went back to his phone. "They'll probably come back. People always do." But I knew better. I knew Kyle. I knew his brothers, and I knew they wouldn't be back anytime soon. They'd drive another hour, maybe 2, laughing the whole way. They'd stop for lunch, take more videos, post them online, and eventually, when they got bored, they'd come back and expect me to laugh it off, to be the cool wife, the one who could take a joke. But I wasn't laughing, not anymore. I walked back outside and sat on the curb again. The sun was relentless. My water bottle was empty. I had no wallet, no ID, no cash, nothing. For the first time in 5 years, I was completely alone. And for the first time in 5 years, I realized something. I didn't want him to come back. Not now, not ever. This wasn't the first time Kyle had hurt me. It wasn't even the worst. But it was the clearest, the most undeniable. There was no way to twist this into something cute or harmless. There was no way to blame myself for being too sensitive. This was what it was, a man who didn't respect me, surrounded by a family that didn't either. and I had spent half a decade trying to make it work. A minivan pulled into the lot. A woman got out, stretched, glanced over at me. She had 2 kids in the back, both asleep. She looked tired but kind, the kind of tired that comes from caring too much, not too little. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I walked over to her anyway. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cracking. "Are you headed north?" She looked me over, sweaty, shaken, holding nothing but a half-warm bottle of water. "Yeah," she said slowly. "You okay?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Can I get a ride? Just as far as you're going?" She studied me for a moment. Then she nodded. "Get in." I climbed into the passenger seat. She didn't ask questions. She just started the engine and pulled back onto the road. As we drove away, I looked back one last time at that gas station, at the place where my marriage had finally, truly ended. And I didn't cry. Not once. We drove in silence for the first 30 minutes. The hum of the engine, the soft breathing of her kids in the back seat, the rush of wind through the cracked window. It was the most peace I'd felt in years. I didn't even know this woman's name, but sitting beside her felt safer than sitting beside my own husband ever had. Finally, she spoke. "I'm Marcy." "Lena," I said quietly. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. "You running from something?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I guess I am." She didn't press. She just reached into the center console and pulled out a bag of pretzels, handed them to me without a word. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I tasted the salt on my tongue. I ate slowly, carefully, like my body was remembering how to function again. "I left my husband once," Marcy said after a while, her voice steady. "Took the kids, got in the car, drove until I hit the state line, stayed with my sister for 3 months. I looked over at her. "Did you go back?" She was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I did. He promised he'd change, said he'd go to therapy, be better. And he tried, I'll give him that. But some people don't know how to love you the way you need. They just know how to keep you around." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. That was Kyle. That was exactly Kyle. He didn't love me. He loved having me. He loved the idea of a wife who would laugh at his jokes, cook his meals, and never complain when his brothers treated me like a punchline. "I'm not going back," I said, more to myself than to her. Marcy glanced at me, and for the first time, she smiled. "Good. Then you're already stronger than I was." We drove for hours. The landscape shifted from flat desert to rolling hills, then to clusters of small towns that looked like they'd been frozen in time. Marcy's kids woke up around hour 3, and she stopped at a rest area to feed them. She bought me a sandwich and a soda, wouldn't let me refuse. "You'll pay it forward someday," she said simply. By the time the sun started to set, we'd reached a small town I'd never heard of. Marcy pulled into a bus station parking lot and put the car in park. "This is as far as I'm going," she said. "But there's a Greyhound that runs through here every few hours. You got someone you can call?" I thought about it. My parents were gone. My friends, well, most of them had been Kyle's friends first. But there was one person, someone I hadn't talked to in years. "My aunt," I said. "Aunt May. She lives up north." Marcy reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. She pressed it into my hand. "For the phone, or food, whatever you need." I stared at the money, then at her. This stranger who had picked me up off the side of the road and asked for nothing in return. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "You take care of yourself, Lena, and don't let anyone make you feel small again." I got out of the van, watched her drive away, and stood there in the parking lot as the sky turned pink and orange. I felt untethered, lost, but also, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Inside the bus station, I found a payphone. It smelled like rust and old coffee, but it worked. I fed it the coins Marcy had given me and dialed the only number I could still remember by heart. It rang 3 times. Then a familiar voice, older now but warm. "Hello? Aunt May?" My voice cracked. "It's Lena." There was a pause, then softly, "Lena, honey, Is that really you?" "Yeah," I said, and suddenly I was crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears that slipped down my cheeks without permission. I didn't know who else to call." "Where are you?" I told her the name of the town. I told her I had no money, no phone, nowhere to go. I didn't tell her about Kyle. Not yet. I couldn't. "Stay right there," she said firmly. "I'll wire you money for a bus ticket. You come straight here, you hear me? Straight here." "Okay," I breathed. "And Lena?" "Yeah?" "You're safe now. Whatever happened, you're safe." I hung up the phone and leaned against the wall, letting myself breathe, really breathe. The kind of deep, shaky breath you take when you've been holding it in for years. An hour later, I picked up the wired money from the station counter, enough for a one-way ticket and a little extra. I bought the ticket, sat down on a hard plastic bench, and waited. The bus arrived just before midnight. It was half empty, smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air. I found a seat near the back, pressed my forehead against the cool window, and watched the town disappear behind me. I thought about Kyle, wondered if he'd come back to that gas station yet, wondered if he was worried, wondered if he even cared. But the thought didn't hurt as much as I expected it to, maybe because I was already too tired to hurt, or maybe because, deep down, I'd already started letting go. The bus rolled through the night, and I closed my eyes. The engine rumbled beneath me, steady and sure. Somewhere out there, Aunt May was waiting. Somewhere out there, I had a chance to start over. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready. The bus ride stretched through the entire night. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kyle's face, heard his brothers laughing, felt that sickening drop in my stomach when I realized they'd actually left me there. So I stayed awake, watched the darkness outside turn into streaks of highway lights and distant towns, watched other passengers doze off, heads bobbing against windows. A woman across the aisle knitted quietly. An older man snored softly near the front. And me, I just sat there, suspended between the life I was leaving and the one I was heading toward. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, my mind started to wander. I thought about the early days with Kyle, back when his smile made my heart skip, back when his brother's pranks seemed harmless, almost charming, back when I thought I could be enough for him. I remembered our wedding day. Small ceremony, just family and a few friends. Kyle had looked so handsome in his suit. He'd whispered promises in my ear as we danced, promises about forever, about building a life together, about always having my back. I wondered when those promises had started to rot, when having my back had turned into laughing at my expense, when forever had become until I get bored. Maybe it had always been this way. Maybe I'd just been too hopeful to see it. The sun started to rise around 6. Pale pink light spilled across the highway, turning everything soft and new. I pressed my hand against the window, felt the coolness of the glass, and made myself a promise. Never again. Never again would I make myself smaller for someone else's comfort. Never again would I laugh off my own pain to keep the peace. Never again would I accept crumbs and call it love. The bus pulled into a station just after 9 in the morning. The sign read Cypress Bay, a name I'd only heard in stories from my childhood. My mother used to talk about visiting Aunt May here, about the ocean and the quiet streets, and the way time seemed to move slower. I gathered my things, which was nothing really, just myself, and stepped off the bus. The air smelled different here, salt and pine and something clean, something that felt like starting over. And there she was. Aunt May stood beside an old blue pickup truck, her silver hair pulled back in a bun, her face creased with age and kindness. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow, but when she saw me, her whole face lit up. "Lena," she breathed, and opened her arms. I walked into her embrace and finally let myself break. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quiet, exhausted tears that soaked into her shoulder while she held me and whispered, "I've got you, baby. I've got you." We stood like that for a long time. Long enough for the other passengers to collect their bags and leave. Long enough for the bus to pull away. long enough for me to remember what it felt like to be held without conditions. When I finally pulled back, Aunt May cupped my face in her hands and looked at me with eyes that saw everything. "You don't have to tell me what happened," she said gently. "Not yet. Not until you're ready. But you're here now, and that's what matters." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She guided me to the truck, and we drove through town in comfortable silence. Cypress Bay was exactly as my mother had described it: small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and nobody was in a hurry. We passed a diner with faded blue awnings, a bookstore with a cat sleeping in the window, a pier stretching out into calm water. Aunt May's house sat at the end of a tree-lined street, white paint peeling slightly, a porch with rocking chairs, flower boxes overflowing with geraniums. It looked like something out of a storybook. It looked like home. Inside, everything was warm and lived in. Crocheted blankets draped over worn furniture, photographs covering every available surface, the smell of something baking, banana bread maybe, drifting from the kitchen. "You must be exhausted," Aunt May said, leading me down a narrow hallway. "This was your mother's room when she used to visit. It's yours now, for as long as you need it." She opened a door to a small bedroom with lace curtains and a quilt-covered bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything gold. I stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of it all. "Thank you," I managed. Aunt May squeezed my shoulder. "Get some rest, honey. We'll talk when you wake up." I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in years. No dreams, no nightmares, just pure, black, peaceful nothing. When I woke up, the sun was setting. I'd slept the entire day. For a moment, I panicked. Where was I? What had happened? But then I remembered. I was safe. I was at Aunt May's. I was free. I found her in the kitchen, humming along to an old radio while she stirred something on the stove. She smiled when she saw me. "Good timing. Soup's almost ready." We ate together at her small kitchen table. She didn't ask questions, didn't push, just talked about the weather, about her garden, about the new pastor at church who couldn't carry a tune to save his life. Normal things, safe things, things that had nothing to do with Kyle or his brothers or gas stations in the middle of nowhere. After dinner, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a small stack of cash and a folded piece of paper with a name written on it in careful handwriting: Lena Morgan. I looked up at her, confused. "Morgan was your mother's maiden name," Aunt May said softly. "My friend down at the diner is looking for help. They don't ask many questions. If you want the work, it's yours." I stared at the name written on that paper. Lena Morgan. It felt like trying on a coat that had been hanging in a closet for years, familiar in a distant way, like something that belonged to me before I'd forgotten who I was. "You don't have to decide right now," Aunt May said gently, clearing the dishes, "but I figure you might want something to keep your hands busy, something that's just yours." She was right. I needed purpose, needed to feel like I was moving forward instead of just hiding. The money she'd given me wasn't much, but it was enough to make me feel less helpless, less like the woman who'd been abandoned at a gas station, and more like someone who could stand on her own feet. "I'll go tomorrow," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Aunt May smiled. "Good girl." That night, I sat on the back porch, wrapped in one of her crocheted blankets. The ocean was close enough that I could hear the waves, a steady, rhythmic sound that felt like breathing. The sky was full of stars, more than I'd ever seen in the city. I thought about Kyle, wondered if he'd even noticed I hadn't come home, wondered if he'd reported me missing, or just assumed I'd find my way back eventually. Part of me wanted to know. The other part, the stronger part, didn't care. I pulled the blanket tighter and let the sound of the ocean wash over me. The diner was called Sal's, though I never met anyone named Sal. It sat right on the main street, sandwiched between a hardware store and a place that sold handmade candles. The building was small, paint faded to a soft blue-gray, with a neon sign in the window that flickered between open and OPE. Inside, it smelled like coffee and bacon grease and decades of stories. Red vinyl booths lined the windows. A long counter ran the length of the room with spinning stools that squeaked when you sat on them. The floor was checkered black and white, scuffed from years of foot traffic. Behind the counter stood a woman who had to be in her 60s, gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a stained apron and the kind of expression that said she'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "You Lena?" she asked before I could even introduce myself. "Yes, ma'am." She looked me up and down. "May called me. Said you needed work and wouldn't cause trouble. That true?" "Yes, ma'am." "You ever waitressed before?" "A little, in college." She grunted. "Good enough. You start now. Aprons in the back. Coffee pots stay full, orders get written clearly, and you smile even when people are being idiots. Got it?" "Got it." "Name's Carter. Mrs. Carter. Don't call me anything else." And just like that, I had a job. The work was simple but constant. Pour coffee, take orders, deliver food, clear tables, repeat. My feet ached by the end of the first shift, and my hand cramped from writing on those little green order pads. But it felt good. It felt real. Mrs. Carter paid me cash at the end of each day, no questions about social security numbers or tax forms, just folded bills pressed into my palm with a nod that said she understood I needed to be invisible for a while. The regulars started to recognize me by the second week. Old fishermen who came in at 5 in the morning for black coffee and toast. A group of retired teachers who met every Tuesday for pie. A young mother with twins who always looked exhausted and grateful when I brought extra crayons. Nobody asked where I came from. Nobody pried. In a small town like this, people seemed to understand that some stories needed time before they could be told. I fell into a rhythm. Wake up early, walk to the diner, work the morning shift, walk home. Spend afternoons helping Aunt May in her garden or reading on the porch. Evenings were quiet. Dinner, dishes, sometimes a card game or old movie on TV. It was simple. It was peaceful. It was everything my life with Kyle had never been. 3 weeks in, everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had ended, and the diner had emptied out except for a couple of teenagers sharing a milkshake in the corner booth. I was refilling napkin dispensers when the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up automatically, smile ready, and froze. A man stumbled through the door, tall, maybe early 40s, dark hair matted with sweat. His shirt was soaked through with blood. His face was pale, twisted with pain. "Help!" he gasped and collapsed. The napkin dispenser hit the floor. My body moved before my brain caught up. I rushed over, dropped to my knees beside him, pressed my hands against his side where blood was seeping through his shirt. "Mrs. Carter!" I shouted. "Call 911!" She was already reaching for the phone. The man's eyes rolled up, unfocused. His breathing was shallow and rapid. I grabbed a handful of clean towels from behind the counter and pressed them against the wound, trying to remember everything I'd learned from a first aid course I'd taken years ago. "Stay with me," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." His eyes found mine, dark brown, clouded with pain but still sharp, still present. They found me," he whispered. Who? Who found you?" But his eyes closed. His body went limp. No, I muttered, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak but there. "Come on, stay with me." The teenagers had run outside, probably scared out of their minds. Mrs. Carter was barking information into the phone, address, injury, hurry, and I just knelt there in a growing pool of blood, holding pressure on a stranger's wound, wondering what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes, but it felt like hours. The paramedics moved fast, efficient, professional, taking over while I stepped back with blood-soaked hands and a racing heart. They worked on him right there on the diner floor, asking questions I couldn't answer. "Do you know him?" "No." "Did you see what happened?" "No, he just walked in like this." "Any ID on him?" One of them checked his pockets, came up empty. No wallet, no phone, nothing. They loaded him onto a stretcher, hooked him up to an IV, and wheeled him out. The lead paramedic paused at the door, looked back at me. "You probably saved his life," he said. "Keeping pressure like that, quick thinking." Then they were gone, sirens wailing into the distance. I stood there in the middle of the diner, hands trembling, covered in someone else's blood. Mrs. Carter appeared beside me with a wet towel. "Come on," she said quietly. "Let's get you cleaned up." In the bathroom, I scrubbed my hands under scalding water, watching the pink-tinged water swirl down the drain. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, shocked. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'd come here to disappear, to heal quietly, not to have bleeding strangers collapse at my feet. When I came out, Mrs. Carter had already mopped the floor. The teenagers were gone. The diner looked normal again, like nothing had happened. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "Police might come by, ask questions." My stomach dropped. "Police?" "Gunshot wound. They have to investigate." She studied my face. "That a problem?" "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "No, I don't know anything." She nodded slowly, like she was reading between the lines. "Then you got nothing to worry about." The police did come, 2 officers, a man and a woman, both looking tired and underpaid. They asked the same questions the paramedics had. I gave the same answers. They took notes, said they'd be in touch if they needed anything else, and left. I finished my shift in a daze, went home, and sat on Aunt May's porch until dark. "You're quiet tonight," she said, settling into the rocking chair beside me. "Something happened at work." I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her knitting needles clicking steadily. "You did good," she said when I finished. "That man's alive because of you." "I don't even know who he is. Maybe you're not supposed to. Maybe you were just in the right place at the right time." I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe this was just a random moment of chaos that would fade into memory. But something about the look in that man's eyes, the fear, the resignation, told me this wasn't over. I didn't see him again for 3 days. I'd almost convinced myself he'd died or been transferred to a bigger hospital. But on Friday morning, the bell above the diner door chimed, and there he was. He looked rough, paler than before, moving carefully like every step hurt. A dark bruise spread across his jaw. His left arm was in a sling, but he was standing, walking, alive. He made his way to the counter and sat down slowly, wincing. Mrs. Carter appeared from the kitchen, took one look at him, and poured a cup of coffee without being asked. "You got a death wish coming back here?" she muttered. He smiled faintly. "Just wanted some decent coffee." I stood frozen by the register, towel in hand, not sure what to say. He turned to look at me, those dark brown eyes, clearer now, fixed on my face. "You're the one who helped me," he said, not a question. Yeah. Thank you." He said it simply, but there was weight behind it. "The paramedics said if you hadn't kept pressure on the wound, I would have bled out before they got there." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "What's your name?" "Lena." "I'm Grant." He took a sip of coffee, grimaced slightly. "I owe you my life, Lena." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree." He set the cup down carefully. "But I'll start with paying for my coffee." Mrs. Carter snorted. "Your money's no good here. Not today." Over the next week, Grant became a regular. He came in every other day, always sat at the same spot at the counter, always ordered black coffee and whatever Mrs. Carter recommended for breakfast. He didn't talk much, just sat quietly, reading the newspaper or staring out the window at the ocean. But I caught him watching me sometimes. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to figure something out. On the 8th day, during a slow afternoon, he finally spoke beyond pleasantries. "You're not from here," he said. I looked up from wiping down the counter. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move, like you're still learning the layout, and you don't have that easy familiarity with the regulars yet." I studied him. "You're observant." "Occupational hazard." "What occupation is that?" He was quiet for a moment. "Used to be a detective, Metro Police, Narcotics Division." "Used to be?" His jaw tightened. "Yeah, used to be." I didn't push. I understood about pasts you didn't want to talk about. "What about you?" he asked. "What brings someone to Cypress Bay?" I thought about lying. about making up some simple story. But something about the way he looked at me, like he already knew I was running from something, made me tell the truth. Part of it, anyway. I needed a fresh start. He nodded slowly. I understand that. Is that what you're doing here? Fresh start? Something like that. He took a sip of coffee. More like staying alive long enough to figure out what comes next. Grant kept coming back. Not every day, but often enough that I started to expect him, started to notice when he didn't show up. There was something steady about him, something quiet and solid that felt different from anyone I'd known before. He never pushed, never asked probing questions. We'd exchange a few words, about the weather, about the coffee, about nothing important, and that was enough. It felt comfortable, safe. But there were moments when I'd catch a shadow pass over his face, moments when he'd tense up at the sound of a car door slamming outside, or when a stranger walked in. He was always watching, always aware of his surroundings in a way that made me think he was waiting for something bad to happen. One evening, about 2 weeks after he first came back, I was walking home from my shift when I heard footsteps behind me, quick, purposeful. My heart jumped into my throat. I walked faster, hands clutching my purse. "Lena!" I spun around, ready to run, and found Grant standing there, hands raised slightly in apology. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." I pressed a hand to my chest, willing my heart to slow down. "What are you doing?" "Walking the same direction, apparently." He fell into step beside me, keeping a respectful distance. "You always walk home alone?" "It's a small town, it's safe." "Is it?" He glanced around the quiet street. "You don't know me very well, but I'm going to give you some advice. Nobody's ever as safe as they think they are." There was something in his tone, not threatening, but serious, like he knew things I didn't. "Are you trying to scare me?" "No, I'm trying to keep you aware." We walked in silence for a few minutes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes tinkled in the breeze. "Why did you really come to Cypress Bay?" I asked. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. "I was set up," he said finally, "by my partner. We were working a case, big drug operation, lot of money involved. I got too close to the truth. Found out my partner was on their payroll. He tried to have me killed, made it look like a deal gone wrong." I stopped walking. "He shot you?" "Not personally, but he arranged it." Grant's voice was flat, emotionless. "I survived. Barely. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and when I got out, they told me the investigation cleared him. Said I was the dirty one, that I'd tried to steal from the dealers and got what I deserved." "That's insane." "That's corruption." He started walking again. "I had a choice, stay and fight it, probably end up dead or in prison, or disappear. So I disappeared." "And came here." "And came here." He glanced at me. "Now you know my story. Fair trade?" I thought about it, about whether I was ready to tell mine. The words came easier than I expected. "I was married," I said, "to a man who thought hurting me was funny. He and his brothers left me stranded at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, called it a prank." Grant stopped walking, his jaw tightened. "He what?" "Just drove off. Left me there with no phone, no money, nothing. Told me not to be mad because it was just a joke." I swallowed hard. "So I left, for real, came here to start over." "Does he know where you are?" "I don't think so. I haven't contacted him, changed my name, started using cash only." I looked at Grant. "I'm not hiding from the law, just from him." "Good," Grant said firmly. "Men like that don't deserve second chances." We reached Aunt May's house. I paused at the gate, turned to face him. "Thank you for walking with me." "Anytime." He hesitated, then added, "I mean that. If you ever feel unsafe or if something seems off, you find me, okay?" "Okay." The next few weeks settled into a comfortable rhythm, work at the diner, quiet evenings with Aunt May, occasional walks with Grant, who'd become something like a friend, maybe more than a friend, though neither of us acknowledged it. He told me more about his life before, about growing up in foster care, about joining the police force because he wanted to make a difference, about the partner he'd trusted with his life who'd betrayed him. I told him about my childhood, about my mother's death, about the slow erosion of my marriage until there was nothing left but resentment and cruelty. We were two people who'd been broken by the world, trying to figure out how to put ourselves back together. One afternoon, Grant didn't show up at the diner, or the next day, or the day after that. By the fourth day, I was worried. Mrs. Carter noticed me watching the door. "He'll turn up," she said. "Men like that always do." But I wasn't so sure. I remembered the way he'd looked over his shoulder, the way he'd talked about people finding him. On the fifth day, I closed up the diner and walked to the small motel on the edge of town where I knew he was staying. The clerk, a bored-looking teenager, barely glanced up when I asked for Grant's room number. "Room 12, but I haven't seen him in a couple days." My stomach twisted. I walked to room 12 and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. "Grant? It's Lena. Are you okay?" Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I was about to leave when I heard it, a faint sound from inside, a groan, something hitting the floor. "Grant!" I ran back to the office. "I need you to open room 12, now. I think someone's hurt." The teenager behind the desk looked annoyed. "I can't just open someone's room because—" "Either you open it or I'm calling 911 and telling them someone's dying in there. Your choice." He stared at me for a second, then grabbed the master key. "Fine. But if he's just sleeping or something, you're the one explaining it." We hurried to room 12. The kid unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Sweat, blood, something sour and wrong. The room was dark, curtains drawn. I fumbled for the light switch. Grant was on the floor beside the bed, barely conscious, his shirt soaked with fresh blood. The wound in his side, the one that had been healing, had reopened, or been reopened. "Call an ambulance," I said, dropping to my knees beside him. "Now!" The teenager ran. "Grant!" I pressed my hands against the wound, feeling the warm blood seep between my fingers. "Grant, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Lena?" "I'm here. What happened?" "They found me." His voice was barely a whisper. "Came last night. I fought them off, but one of them had a knife." "Stop talking. Save your strength." "No, listen." He grabbed my wrist with surprising force. "You need to be careful. They asked about you, about the girl from the diner. They know we've been talking." Ice ran through my veins. "Who are they?" "People my partner sent. They won't stop until—" He coughed, grimaced in pain. "Until I'm dead." The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "You're not going to die," I said firmly. "Not today." The paramedics came, different ones this time, but just as efficient. They stabilized him, loaded him up, asked me questions I couldn't really answer. I rode with them to the hospital, holding Grant's hand while he drifted in and out of consciousness. At the hospital, they wheeled him straight into surgery. A nurse handed me paperwork to fill out, but I didn't know his last name, didn't know his birthday, didn't know anything official about him. I left most of it blank. Hours passed. I sat in the waiting room, still wearing my diner uniform, dried blood on my hands and clothes. A doctor finally emerged, looking tired. "Are you family?" "I'm all he's got," I said. The doctor studied me for a moment, then nodded. "He'll live. Lost a lot of blood, but we got the bleeding stopped. The wound was deliberately reopened. Looks like a knife, like someone was trying to finish what they started." "When can I see him?" "He's in recovery now. Give it an hour, then you can sit with him." I called Aunt May from a payphone, told her I'd be home late. She didn't ask questions, just told me to be safe. Then I sat back down and waited. When they finally let me in, Grant was awake but groggy from the anesthesia. His face was pale against the white hospital sheets. He managed a weak smile when he saw me. "You make a habit of saving my life?" "Apparently." I pulled a chair close to the bed. "What happened?" He closed his eyes. "Two men broke into my room around 2 a.m. I woke up when I heard the lock click, got my gun out, fired a warning shot. They ran, but not before one of them got close enough with a blade." You have a gun? Former cop, remember? Old habits. He opened his eyes, looked at me seriously. Lena, they're not going to stop. My partner, his name's Detective Marcus Webb, he's got too much to lose if I talk, and now they know about you. I can take care of myself. Against professionals? Guys who do this for a living? He shook his head. No, you need to be smart about this. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. I need to think. He winced, adjusted his position slightly. But promise me something. Promise me you'll be careful. Watch your back. Don't walk home alone. If you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you run. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say I wasn't afraid. But the truth was, I was terrified. I'd just escaped one nightmare with Kyle. I couldn't handle being dragged into another one. I promise, I said quietly. Grant stayed in the hospital for 5 days. I visited every evening after my shift, bringing him terrible hospital coffee and updates from the diner. Mrs. Carter sent him pie. Aunt May sent him a prayer card and a hand-knitted blanket. He seemed touched by the small-town kindness, like he'd forgotten people could be good. The police came to question him, but Grant stuck to his story. He'd surprised a burglar, there was a struggle, the guy ran off. He didn't mention Detective Webb or drug dealers or corruption. He told me later that involving local cops would just put more people at risk. On the 6th day, he was discharged. I picked him up in Aunt May's truck, drove him back to the motel. His room had been cleaned, the blood scrubbed away, but the atmosphere felt wrong, tainted. I can't stay here, he said, standing in the doorway. It's not safe, not for me, and especially not for anyone nearby. Where will you go? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe it's time to leave Cypress Bay, keep moving. The thought of him leaving made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. In the few weeks I'd known him, Grant had become important to me, more than a friend, someone who understood what it meant to run, to hide, to start over. Or, I said carefully, you could stay with us. Aunt May's house has a spare room in the basement. It's separate from the main house, has its own entrance. You'd be safer there than alone. Grant looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I can't put you and your aunt in danger. You won't. Think about it. 2 men broke into your motel room because it was isolated and easy to access. Aunt May's house is on a street with neighbors. People pay attention there, and if someone comes looking, there are witnesses. Lena, besides, I interrupted, you can barely move without pain. You need time to heal properly, and you need people around who actually care whether you live or die. I crossed my arms. Aunt May already said yes. I called her from the hospital. He blinked. You talked to her about this? She's tougher than she looks, and she doesn't scare easy. I met his eyes. Neither do I, not anymore. Grant studied my face for a long moment, then sighed in defeat. You're stubborn. I've been told that before. He smiled faintly. All right, but at the first sign of trouble, I'm gone. I won't risk your safety. Deal. We gathered his few belongings, a duffel bag with some clothes, his gun locked in a case, not much else. A life packed into one bag. I understood that better than he knew. Aunt May greeted us at the door with sweet tea and a plate of cookies, like Grant was just a normal houseguest, and not a man being hunted by corrupt cops and hired killers. She showed him to the basement room, small but clean, with a bed, a dresser, and a tiny bathroom. A separate entrance led to the backyard. It's not much, she said, but it's yours as long as you need it. Grant looked around, something unreadable crossing his face. It's more than I've had in months. Thank you, ma'am. Call me May, and you're welcome. She patted his arm gently. Lena tells me you're in some trouble. You don't have to explain it to me, but while you're under my roof, you're family, and we protect family. I saw Grant's throat work as he swallowed hard. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That night, the 3 of us sat on the back porch. Aunt May knitted, the rhythmic click of needles filling the comfortable silence. Grant sat stiffly, still in pain, but trying not to show it. I brought out coffee and the leftover pie Mrs. Carter had sent. I haven't felt this normal in over a year, Grant said quietly, staring out at the darkening sky. "What was your life like before?" Aunt May asked. "Before all the trouble?" He was quiet for a moment. "Busy. I worked a lot. Too much, probably. Had a small apartment downtown, barely decorated because I was never there. Most of my friends were other cops. We'd grab beers after shifts, complain about paperwork and department politics." He smiled sadly. "I thought I was doing important work, making a difference." "You were," I said. "It's not your fault someone corrupt destroyed that." "Maybe, but I should have seen it coming. Should have noticed the signs." He shook his head. "Marcus was my partner for 3 years. We had each other's backs, or so I thought. Turns out he was playing both sides the whole time, collecting a paycheck from the department and another one from the dealers we were supposed to be busting." "How did you find out?" Aunt May asked. "I noticed money moving wrong, evidence disappearing, arrests that should have stuck suddenly falling apart. I started documenting everything, building my own case." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I was going to take it to internal affairs, but Marcus found out first, set me up for a buy that was really an ambush. I got shot, left for dead in an alley. By the time I woke up in the hospital, he'd already spun the story, painted me as the dirty cop, said I'd tried to steal from the dealers." "That's horrible," Aunt May said softly. "That's survival. In that world, you either stay quiet or you disappear." He looked at both of us. "I chose to disappear. Came here thinking it was far enough away, small enough to stay invisible. But I guess I was wrong." "You can't run forever," I said. "I know, but I don't know what else to do. If I come forward, it's my word against his. He's got the department behind him, evidence that makes me look guilty. I've got nothing but the truth, and that's not enough." We sat in silence after that, each lost in our own thoughts. I understood his helplessness, understood what it felt like to be trapped by circumstances you couldn't control. Over the next week, Grant healed slowly. He was careful, cautious, always watching the street from behind curtains. But gradually, the tension in his shoulders eased. He started joining us for meals, helping Aunt May with small repairs around the house, even smiling occasionally. I caught him watching me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. And I caught myself watching him too. The way he moved, despite the pain, the careful way he spoke, the intelligence in his eyes. He was different from Kyle in every way that mattered. Where Kyle had been loud and careless, Grant was quiet and deliberate. Where Kyle had demanded attention, Grant simply existed, steady and solid. One evening, I came home from the diner to find Grant sitting on the porch steps, a notebook in his lap. "What are you doing?" I asked, sitting down beside him. "Making a list. Everyone who might have been involved. Every detail I can remember about the case." He showed me pages filled with names, dates, notes. "I've been running for so long I forgot how to fight back, but maybe it's time to stop running." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if I can find enough evidence, real evidence, I might be able to expose Marcus and everyone working with him, clear my name." "That sounds dangerous." "Everything's dangerous at this point." He looked at me. "But I can't keep living like this, looking over my shoulder, waiting for them to find me. I'd rather go down fighting than spend the rest of my life hiding." I understood what Grant meant about fighting back. I'd spent years with Kyle accepting things I shouldn't have, swallowing my anger, pretending everything was fine. Running had been necessary, but there was something empowering about the idea of standing your ground. "How can I help?" I asked. Grant looked surprised. "Lena, this isn't your fight." "Maybe not, but you're living under our roof, eating our food, and you saved my sanity just by being someone who understands what it's like to start over." I met his eyes. "Besides, I'm tired of feeling helpless. If there's something I can do, I want to do it." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but we do this smart, no unnecessary risks." Over the next several days, Grant worked methodically through his notes. He'd wake up early, spend hours writing, cross-referencing dates and events from memory. I'd come home from my shifts at the diner and find him surrounded by papers, lost in concentration. Aunt May brought him coffee and sandwiches without comment, treating his investigation like it was the most normal thing in the world. I need to make contact with someone from my old precinct, Grant said one evening. Someone I trust. There was a detective, Sarah Chen, who always played things straight. If anyone would listen, it'd be her. Can you trust her? I asked. I think so, but it's been over a year. People change. Pressure changes people. He ran a hand through his hair. Still, I don't have many options. How will you reach her? That's the problem. I can't exactly call the precinct, and I don't have her personal number anymore. Left my old phone behind when I ran. He tapped his pen against the notebook. I need to find a way to contact her without tipping off Marcus or anyone else. I thought for a moment. What about social media? Could you send her a private message? Too risky. Those accounts could be monitored. Marcus is smart. He'd have eyes on anyone who might help me. Then we need someone else to make contact. Someone he wouldn't suspect. I paused. Someone like me. Grant shook his head immediately. No, absolutely not. Think about it. I'm nobody to them, just a random woman. I could call the precinct, ask for Detective Chen, say I have information about an old case. Keep it vague. If she's interested, we set up a meeting somewhere public and safe. And if it's a trap? If Marcus has already gotten to her, then we don't show up. We'll know by how she responds. I leaned forward. Grant, you said it yourself. You can't do this alone. Let me help. He was quiet for a long time, conflict written across his face. Finally, he sighed. If we do this, we do it carefully, scripted, nothing that could trace back to you or this house. Agreed. We spent the next 2 hours crafting exactly what I'd say. Grant wrote out a script, anticipated questions, prepared responses. We'd use a payphone in the next town over, make the call during business hours when the precinct would be busy. The morning we planned to make the call, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach. This was real. We were actually doing this. Grant drove. He'd been healing well enough to handle short trips. We found a payphone outside a grocery store about 20 miles from Cypress Bay. I held the script in my shaking hands while Grant stood nearby, watching the parking lot. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Metro Police, how can I direct your call? Detective Sarah Chen, please. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. One moment. Hold music. My heart pounded. Grant gave me an encouraging nod. This is Detective Chen. Detective Chen, my name is... I glanced at the script. My name is Rachel. I have information about a case from last year. The officer involved shooting in the warehouse district. There was a pause. I'm listening. I can't talk on this line, but I have evidence that suggests the official report was inaccurate. If you're interested in the truth, I'll meet you. Somewhere public. Another pause, longer this time. Who gave you this number? Someone who trusted you to do the right thing. Is this about Grant Morrison? Her voice had changed, softer, more urgent. My breath caught. Grant's eyes widened. He nodded. Keep going. I can't confirm that on the phone. Will you meet me or not? Yes. When and where? We'd already chosen the location. A coffee shop in a town halfway between Cypress Bay and the city, busy enough to blend in, public enough to be safe. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., corner cafe on Main Street in Millbrook. Come alone. If I see anyone else, I walk. How will I know you? I'll find you, detective. And detective, if this is a setup, if anyone besides you shows up, the evidence disappears. Understood? Understood. I'll be there. I hung up, my hands trembling. Grant pulled me away from the phone quickly. You did great, he said. Perfect. She knew your name. She remembered. Yeah. His expression was unreadable. That's either really good or really bad. We drove back to Cypress Bay in tense silence. The meeting was set. Now we just had to wait and see if Detective Chen was friend or foe. That night, neither of us slept much. I heard Grant moving around in the basement room, restless. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen for water. He was already there, sitting at the table in the dark. Can't sleep either? I asked. Too much riding on tomorrow. He looked up at me. Lena, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to promise me something. You and May, You disappear. You take whatever money you have and you go somewhere far away. Change your names again. Don't look back." "Grant, promise me." His voice was fierce. "Promise me you won't let them hurt you because of me." I sat down across from him. "I promise, but you have to promise me something too." "What?" "That you'll fight, that you won't give up, no matter what happens tomorrow." He reached across the table, took my hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "I promise." The drive to Millbrook felt endless. Grant insisted on going alone at first, but I refused to let him face this without backup. We compromised. I'd be in the cafe, at a different table, close enough to help if things went wrong, but far enough to seem unconnected. Aunt May packed us sandwiches like we were going on a picnic, not potentially walking into a trap. Before we left, she pulled me aside. "You be smart, you hear me? Both of you come home safe." "We will," I promised, hoping it was true. The cafe was perfect for what we needed. Large windows facing the street, multiple exits, enough customers to provide cover but not so crowded we couldn't spot trouble. We arrived 30 minutes early. Grant did a sweep of the area while I secured a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee, positioned himself where he could watch both the door and me. We'd agreed on signals. If I touched my hair, something felt wrong. If he stood up abruptly, we'd abort and leave separately. 2 o'clock came, then 2:05, 2:10. At 2:15, a woman walked in, mid-40s, Asian, wearing dark jeans and a blazer. She had the bearing of someone who carried authority but was trying to downplay it. Her eyes scanned the room methodically, cop's eyes, trained to assess threats. She got in line for coffee, ordered, and found a table by the window, sat down facing the door, waiting. Detective Sarah Chen. I watched Grant. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her, just kept sipping his coffee, reading his newspaper. We'd agreed, we'd observe her first, make sure she was alone, make sure this wasn't a setup. 15 minutes passed. Chen checked her phone occasionally, but didn't make any calls, didn't signal anyone. She looked nervous, actually nervous, which was oddly reassuring. Finally, Grant folded his newspaper, left money on the counter, and walked past my table toward the exit. Our signal. He'd circle the block, check for surveillance, come back through the rear entrance. I waited 5 more minutes, then stood, coffee cup in hand, and approached Chen's table. "Detective Chen?" She looked up, eyes sharp and assessing. "Rachel? Can I sit?" She gestured to the empty chair. I sat down, set my coffee carefully on the table, kept my hands visible, non-threatening. "You said you had information," Chen said quietly. "About Grant Morrison. Before I say anything, I need to know, do you believe the official story? That he was dirty?" Chen's jaw tightened. "What I believe and what I can prove are 2 different things." "That's not an answer." She leaned forward slightly. "Grant was one of the best detectives I ever worked with. Honest, thorough, gave a damn about the job. When they said he'd gone bad, tried to steal from dealers," she shook her head, "I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now." Something in my chest loosened. "Then you'll want to hear what I have to say." The back door of the cafe opened. Grant walked in, moved directly to our table, slid into the 3rd chair before Chen could react. Her eyes went wide. "Grant!" "Sarah." His voice was rough. "Been a long time." She looked between us, pieces clicking into place. "You're not Rachel." "No, I'm the person keeping him alive." I glanced at Grant. He needed to know he could trust you before showing himself. Chen's hand had moved instinctively toward her hip, where her service weapon would be, but she stopped herself, deliberately placed both hands on the table. "You look like hell," she said to Grant. "I've had a rough year." He leaned back slightly, wincing at the movement. "Still healing from the 2nd time someone tried to kill me." "2nd time?" 2 weeks ago, 2 men broke into my motel room. One of them reopened my wound with a knife. He watched her face carefully. "Marcus is still trying to tie up loose ends." Chen's expression darkened. "I suspected. After you disappeared, things got weird. Cases we'd been building suddenly fell apart. Evidence went missing. Witnesses recanted. She lowered her voice. I started asking questions, got told to back off, that the Morrison case was closed and I should focus on my own work. Did you? Officially, yes. Unofficially. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then set it on the table showing a document. I kept my own files, tracked inconsistencies. The timeline of that night doesn't add up. The witness statements contradict each other. And the ballistics report, someone altered it, I'm sure of it. Grant leaned forward, studying the screen. How sure? Sure enough that I've been scared to push it further. Marcus has friends, high-ranking friends. If I make a move without solid evidence, I'm the next one who disappears. What if I told you I have evidence? Grant said. Names, dates, transactions, everything I saw before Marcus set me up. From memory? Mostly, but I've been putting it together. If we can find just one piece of physical evidence, a paper trail, a recording, anything concrete, we can build a case. Chen looked at him for a long moment. This is dangerous, Grant, for all of us. I know, but I'm tired of running, and I'm tired of good cops being afraid to do their jobs because of guys like Marcus. He met her eyes. Are you in or not? She was quiet, thinking. I watched emotions play across her face, fear, anger, determination. Finally, she nodded. I'm in, but we do this smart. Build an airtight case before we make any moves. Agreed. Where are you staying? Small town. Safe for now. But I need access to department records, case files from that time period. Can you get them? Maybe. I'd have to be careful. Can't just request Morrison files without raising flags. Related cases, then. Anything connected to the drug operation we were investigating. Chen nodded slowly. I can work with that. Give me a week. We exchanged contact information, burner phone numbers, careful protocols, no names in messages, code words if something went wrong. As we stood to leave separately, Chen caught Grant's arm. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Sorry I couldn't help you before. Sorry you had to run. Grant's expression softened. You're helping now. That's what matters.